Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and we have another really good show for you today. My guest today is Madison Frederick, and Madison is a #1 best-selling international and US. She is a best-selling author in the US, Canada, Australia, and France in 57 categories. She is also a speaker, a teacher, a certified master life coach, a Reiki master, a certified spiritual counselor, and certified emotional freedom technique practitioner. As a trauma survivor, she recognizes the vital need to release past negative beliefs, emotions, fears that cause stress, anxiety, self-doubt, and one that we all fall into, and self-sabotage, to live an extraordinary life of freedom. She has adapted the lessons she's learned to help others transform their lives. Madison believes in giving back to her community and has served in local organizations for decades. She has served on the board of Divorce Cafe and is a member of Sheroes. I like that. Sheroes United, and a nonprofit organization that helps women overcome trauma. Her particular forte is working with incarcerated women who are improving their lives and desiring to leave as victors and leaders instead of victims. And I tell you what, I really like that. So today we're going to be talking about trauma survivor, helping overcome trauma. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Madison. Madison, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with me today.
Of course, I'm delighted to be here.
And I do have to say thank you to my lovely, lovely friend who I just adore and love so much, Angie Martinez, for introducing us. So Angie, I hope you have an opportunity to listen to this podcast because it will be amazing. I already know. Thank you so much for introducing me and Madison. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
So, my gosh, #1 bestseller. What got you to write this book in the first place? I mean, what happened in your life to direct you to go this direction?
Well, I've known since my late 20s that I was going to be writing a book. Had no idea what it was going to be about. Initially, I thought it might be a book that I would co-author with my son, and the topic was going to be about indigo children, which is all about different energy that kids were coming in onto the planet at that time. But obviously that didn't work out. But I believe that all of the things that I've gone through were divinely orchestrated for me to be able to now share and teach about it. When I first met my writing coach, a fabulous woman by the name of Bridget Cook Birch, she's known as the Book Whisperer, and the first writer's retreat that I went to, she whispered in my ear, basically, just figuratively, have you ever thought about writing a self-help book? And I'm like, no. I thought I was going to be writing a memoir about gaslighting, which I do talk about in my book, but that subject left the playing field many, many times, and the book morphed and is now what it has become. So I think it's important to understand that there's a lot of misconceptions about a lot of things, not just addiction, but a lot of areas in our life. We approach things, ideas, and viewpoints based on the information that we have at the time. And part of the reason why I wanted to write this book is to be of service to help primarily women, but not necessarily, overcome their trauma and learn to walk through to the other side. So I talk about a lot of the tools and experiences that I've had. The book is totally my story. It's not meant to be therapeutic in any way from the perspective of a licensed professional. I don't claim to be one. All I know is that I can share my experience, strength, and hope. And that's what my intent for this book has been about. So,
I love that, Madison, because I think a lot of us, and I would say even me including, because I've been wanting to write a book for the past year and a half, ever since I've gotten into the recovery community and really opened up about my own personal story, what I've gone through in life. And we hold ourselves back, right? Because we don't think we are capable of doing it, thinking that we've got to be a professional writer. Or we've, and maybe some classes and getting some help from individuals definitely is a plus, right?
Mhm.
But I really think it holds us back. And just to write a book like you did about your own personal life, it's huge because so many of us think we're the only ones that's going through something. And
Yeah,
it's
that's true.
crazy that we think that way because we hear our friends go through things, right? It may not be the same type of thing, but there there's millions and millions of people on this planet, and we
Yeah,
think we're the only one that's fighting this one particular thing. There's thousands of us that are doing it.
yeah. Well, I think partly in a contributing factor to that is that we don't understand that we deserve to get to the other side or deserve to work on that. And that, um, when I first started looking at myself, actually started when I walked into the doors of the 12-step program, Al Anon. My first husband was a practicing alcoholic, and I know typically you can't say somebody is or isn't an alcoholic. He has passed on now. And I look back at the drinking and the blackouts and all of those things that happened when we were together. Um, when somebody suggested that I went to go to Al-Anon, I went kicking and screaming and dragging my heels because why am I going? He's the one with the problem, right?
Yeah.
If he hadn't drunk or if he quit drinking, as he promised me over and over and over time again that he would do, I wouldn't have to be here. Well, it didn't take but maybe two meetings, but probably the first meeting I went to understand that I had a huge piece in that. And I learned an awful lot in those rooms, not just other people's stories and understanding that, we all have our stuff. I do write in my book about my sexual abuse from my stepbrother. And I listened to some of those people in there, mostly women, that would talk about their sexual abuse and how decades that they endured or whatever their story was. And I had the idea, well, it only happened to me once, so therefore it's no big deal. Trauma is trauma, abuse is abuse, no matter how many times. And I think it's important for people to understand that it's just like when people say, oh, you shouldn't feel that way. No, feelings are valid.
Yes.
Whatever you're feeling is what you feel. And to be silent about it just makes it harder for us to go through and work on ourselves because I think, like what you said, we don't think everybody else is going through the same things that we are. And the fact is, whether it be food, cocaine, whatever the drug of choice is, it all has the same overlasting results and consequences.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and the brain, I think you and I spoke about this during our pre-interview thing, that that study that they did up at the University of Utah many, many years ago. I don't even know when it was. And they brought people in that battled all types of addiction and hooked the electrodes up to them and then actually put them in front of that addiction. And the brain fired the exact same way for every single addiction.
yeah,
So it's again, it goes to show it's not just that substance or that thing, right? It's
right.
yeah, because it all fires the same way. And I also love, Madison, that you said it's okay to feel what we're feeling because it
Yeah,
is, right? That's why God gave us these feelings. That's just how I see it, right? God gave us all these feelings for us to go through all these different emotions. Because if not, how else do we learn? How else do we become stronger?
exactly. Exactly. And before we got on the taping portion of this, I did mention to you that my book has 19 chapters in it, and there's only a couple of chapters that really do go hand in hand, but most of them are pretty much standalone topics. And it's laid out in the book in chronological order of some semblance, the way I went through things. But I think it's important for folks to understand that when we get onto the road of recovery, you may be working on, I don't know, enabling, for example. You may be aware that you're doing all of those things. And so you work on that for a little while, and then, oh, something else pops up and you need to work on that. So codependency or whatever, because the behaviors that we learn, the learned behaviors that we do, that we learn, the I'm not good enough, the I'm not smart enough, all of the not enough stuff are all things that we've created within ourselves as a way to survive and protect ourselves from the big world out there. And when we realize that those things are learned, we also can understand that they can be unlearned. And that's the purpose of the book, is to go through each thing, and step by step I give tools and examples of what you can do to get through it. So what you said, that God put us here to feel all of those feelings, I personally believe that all of the issues that I went through, so the book goes into talks about estrangement, it talks about abandonment. I do a chapter on forgiveness because my dad was a narcissist. And to kick off the book in the first place, my son sent me an email 15 years ago declaring that I was a narcissist and I would not be allowed to be in his life or my grandchildren's life anymore. And he wasn't willing to talk about it. He said, don't bother responding to this because I won't answer. And as you can imagine, I felt like the rug had been pulled out from underneath me. And I thought, how can this be? And then I started, and typical of how people react, I believe, is that, well, he's the one that's doing all of this. I went to, finger point, finger point, finger point.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I wouldn't have done what I did if he hadn't. I wouldn't be where I'm at in Al-Anon if he hadn't. But that accusation really saved my life, truthfully. And I'm very grateful for him sending that, because it gave me the opportunity to really deep dive, look at myself and question, okay, am I a narcissist? Where did this all come from? And so I started doing a deep dive in that. And when I started doing all of that reflectiveness on narcissism, and I can talk about narcissism a little bit in a minute, but I also recognize that the things that, now let me back the bus up just a little bit. I started in Al-Anon, almost 34 years ago, 35 years ago is when I first hit those rooms. And so I learned about enabling. I learned about codependency. The first book that was ever shared with me was Codependent No More by Melody Beatty. And so as time went on, I learned all of these labels, if you will. So when I started writing the book and looking back and doing a deep dive and looking at my behaviors, I also was able to recognize the patterns of the things that I did. So how it came to be that I did all the enabling, how it came to be that I became codependent. And so not only did I do a deep dive to determine whether I was or wasn't a narcissist, I also was able to kind of dissect all of those other things and understand, geez, I really could have done that differently. And not in a way of beating myself up, but just in a way of discovery.
Yeah.
And, that's how this book came to be. So when I started looking at narcissism, I learned a lot of different things. And another reason why I wrote this book is because there's such a misconception or misunderstanding, I think, of what is a narcissist, what is gaslighting. Those are two very common buzzwords right now.
Yeah, they are.
And in 2022, Merriam-Webster, gaslighting was, or gaslight, either way, was the #1 research word for that year.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of set the record straight in some respect, because nothing is black and white. It's just like what you said, that we're going through things, and just because you're going through, say, a divorce, or coming out of recovery from anorexia or bulimia, any of those things, just because we've done those things doesn't make us who we are.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of us and part of the behavior, but that does not mean that's who we are.
I I love that you said that, and it's crazy that you did, because I just did a post on social media today of
Oh,
a picture that someone took of me on one of my hikes, and I'm standing up on this rock on top of a mountain, and you can see the other mountain in the distance, right? And I was talking about how being honest has come back and bit me in the rear quite a few times,
yeah,
and I was a person 14 years ago who was a liar and a manipulator. So I take this very seriously for my life now, because my integrity means everything to me, right?
yeah.
And
Ditto.
it definitely, I just did a 3-week coaching session, and it come out that I was a lovable, authentic man of integrity. And it really made me feel good, which means, and the reason why is because all the work I've put into myself the past 14 years has literally changed me. And I also put in the post that, you know, I am not the same person I was before, and I'm totally different. And I even put in there, I'm not even the same person I was 2 weeks ago, because I
Yeah,
continue to grow, right? And it could
yeah,
only be this big. And there's some days it's a little bigger. However,
yeah,
as long as I'm growing, I'm happy with that. So it's crazy that you mentioned that, because I just did this post on it. And yeah, yeah, because we seem to hold things, especially if you really don't know someone all that well, right?
yeah,
I have said things in my past of things that's happened, or things that someone has said to me, and it's been taken completely the other direction, like, that's who you are today, and see ya, I don't want anything to do with you, because
right.
that's who you are. And it's not the case.
Yeah,
Yet people seem to jump that direction. And I do my best not to dismiss anybody from my table till I really get to know them a lot more.
yeah, yeah. That's true. And we're all influenced. Like you and I are having this conversation right now, and this conversation even has been influenced by your history, my history, and people that we know, things that we've read or whatever. It's impacting our conversation right here, right now.
Yeah.
So, I think it's amazing to me how the intricacy of the brain and the mind of how it comes about determining things. You know, when I started doing the deep dive into seeing, well, am I a narcissist? I realized that a lot of my behaviors, I understand why he thought I was a narcissist, why and I don't know, I'm still estranged from him, so I don't know where he's at right now in
Mm.
his thoughts. But I do know that some of the things that I did were based on old habits, enabling codependency. And for those of you who may or may not know what codependency is, it's when we're looking outside ourselves to in relationships, whether it be family, friends, or whoever, that we're looking out here to validate ourselves and make us feel whole instead of finding the wholeness within. So I understood in a warped way a lot of the things that I did for my son. They lived with us. He and his family lived with us for about 3.5 years. And there were a lot of things that I did were that when I thought I was being helpful. Um, and there's a fine line between enabling and helping. I've come to learn.
Yeah.
Um, And, they were unsolicited. So the end result is it was like I cut his legs out from underneath him, and didn't allow him to be the provider for his family
Yeah.
that rightfully he should have been. So I look back on that and I see very, very clearly how he could have come to that conclusion. But having said that, I also believe now that everybody has a narcissistic tendency within them, because it's part of being human. I know sometimes people, you look at somebody and the judgment is, oh, they must think they're all that in a bag of chips. When in the reality, it may just be that they feel very assured of themselves and they've got a lot of integrity and they like who they are.
Yeah.
And when people think, oh, they're all that in a bag of chips, usually it's because the person that's making that declaration doesn't feel so great about themselves, is what it boils down to.
I agree with that 100%. Yep.
So, so the thing that precipitated the demise of the relationship between myself and my son is when my granddaughter was about 2.5, 3. I came home from work and he said, "Hey, you know, my daughter got into your bag and there was some loose Tylenol in there, and she could have died because she ate one." And my thought was, well, wait a minute, I'm not the only one that owns a purse here, and how could I be held responsible for that? Blah 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 blah. Blah. And he was very angry, rightfully so. I don't know that she could die from one Tylenol, but I think that was a little bit of an extreme statement. However, at the time, I could not allow myself to back down and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake." And so my comeback to that was, "Well, I don't know what's the big deal. She didn't die." And he understandably was mad, left the room. And I just thought, if I could have said anything, that was not the thing to say. But
Yeah.
I could not get it out of my mouth that I was sorry and that it didn't mean it. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. And I think that's important distinction, because the bottom line is, for me, when writing this book, the biggest lesson, as I learned that I was how to justify every single solitary thing I did. I couldn't back down. I was never wrong. A lot of times I didn't say what I was thinking, but that really affected my interactions and stuff, because body language is also a thing. And do I regret those statements? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. But, we do what we do at the time and we deal with the tools that we have. And I learned an awful lot of stuff, behaviors from my dad, the narcissist.
Yeah.
He could never back down. He could never say he was wrong. If I would question him about something, even as I got older and as an adult, "Oh, well, you misunderstood," or "I didn't mean it that way," or "I didn't say it at all." Those were his top three go-tos.
Yeah. And we are all molds of our parents, right? We
Yeah.
get brought up in a house, and I just read a statement not too long ago, actually before I came on the show, that I think Morgan Freeman said about, stop blaming your parents. You're an adult now. Start making your own choices,
Yeah.
right? And I did. I think not all of us, but I believe there is a large majority of us that start seeing that. We start going through life and we start seeing these patterns and start realizing, wait a minute, I remember growing up around this and I don't care for it much, right? So what do I do to change it? I used to have a terrible anger issue. Terrible, terrible. Just it didn't take much to light my fuse. My fuse was probably about that long. And gosh, I remember going to the emergency center lots of times because I was putting my hand through doors and windows and hitting bricks
Mm.
and kicking things and throwing things and getting in fights. And then one day I woke up and I went, what am I doing? what am I doing? However, that's how I saw things go when I was growing up, right? If things didn't go right, you threw a fit. So
Yeah.
I just thought that's how you handled these certain situations. We all have that capability of changing and opening our eyes, right? You just explained this process of, oh my gosh, look what I did, right? I could have done it differently.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine said something to me that I work with about the message in the mirror. And when you
Yeah.
look in the mirror and you start looking at yourself, start paying attention to the message, right? Because even though I'm still working on, I think you and I touched base on this before, right before we started recording. I'm still working on this, right? It's definitely work
Yeah.
in progress, and I'll probably work on it the rest of my life. You know, it's saying something and then realize, oh my gosh, if I would have stopped and put just a little bit more thought, just a little bit more thought, I could have said it this way. So this person wouldn't have reacted the way that they reacted. Now, their reaction is still their choice, right? They
Yeah.
still chose to take it however it is that they want to take it.
Exactly.
However, it could have it could have dampened things a little bit more, and
Yeah.
also our ego, right? Because what you were telling me, I keep seeing the word ego flashing up, and our ego has a way of taking over and not allowing us to see the picture when it's actually right in front of us.
Well, the saying goes, the teacher shows up when the student's ready.
Yep.
And I think that's so true. My my entourage became my teachers. My entourage meaning the people that I had problems with in my life, who I blamed, didn't understand, or thought, well, they don't understand me, and all of these things that I would tell myself. But the bottom line, I'm responsible for all of that. I'm responsible for all of those choices that I made. I think, I don't know how many times you've heard it, but I've heard it many times throughout my lifetime. Well, I see how my parents were, and I'm not going to be like them. But 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what you end up doing,
Yep.
because that's what you were taught, and even though, I mean, it's not funny, haha, but I look at some of the things that my dad did as far as controlling. And no, I didn't do that, but I did something else just the same, same book, different chapter,
Yeah.
trying to do it different. And I didn't do it any different, because you do what you learn. So,
Yeah. And we all go through traumas in our life, right? I mean,
yeah,
life is full of them, and
yeah,
they won't stop. It'll continue. Just because you had a dozen or 100 already doesn't mean you're not going to have 100 more. Because again,
no,
that's just how life. And sometimes we create our own trauma by making wrong
absolutely.
choices. Other times
Yeah.
it's just part of life, right? And again, it's that growing process. What got you to decide to, gosh, and I hope I haven't lost track here by what you've shared already, but the trauma that you've gone through, and wanting to help other individuals, and because I made a lot of mistakes in the depths of my wife's addiction. I said a lot of mean things, I did a lot of wrong things because I didn't understand it, right? I was a
Yeah.
certified recovery therapist without a certificate, is like how I like to put it. I did not pass the test, but I was still a therapist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I knew everything there was to know about alcoholism because I drank alcohol. So I knew what. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the show, because I wanted to also share mistakes that I made, hoping that I could help others not make those same mistakes with their loved ones.
Right.
That kind of like what you wanted to do with this, and working with women? Because I mean, I've
Yeah.
had a lot of women on the show who have gone through some, oh my gosh, some of the trauma that these gals have gone through.
Yeah.
It gets me angry, first off, because I just cannot believe a man would do something like that. First off, it gets me very angry. And then also, it just gets me angry because of how belittling they make other the opposite sex feel, right?
Yeah,
Is that something that you wanted to also help change by doing what you're doing? Is going, look, I've gone through this. You know what it's like. You're not someone who was uncertified like me. You're someone who is certified. You understand it.
exactly. It is because so the so I've got so in my book, the book has things, a chapter about narcissism. There's one about sexual abuse. There's one about labels, enabling, limiting beliefs. I go into gaslighting, codependency. I talk about the 12 steps and my experience with that. And I talk about what's called the happy hormones, which there are things that we can do for ourselves to help us put us in a different mind space, create our own serotonin levels. And there's things that we can do to help with all of that. I talk about my food addiction. Um, that was my drug of choice. And I would do some really bizarre things. One time I had joined Weight Watchers and got down to my goal weight, and I became a lifetime member. Well, at the time, to go back into Weight Watchers, you had to have 10 pounds to lose. And I was only like 3.5 pounds over my goal weight, right? But I really wanted the support from Weight Watchers. So what did I do? I ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches until I ate enough stuff, ice cream and whatever, so I could put on that and be 10 pounds over. I mean, that's insanity, right? It's like,
Yes.
you know, but so my point is that all of these things that I've gone through, my therapist once told me, he says, I don't know how you even survived all of this. And my belief is I survived it so I could write about it, so I could help people, period, end of story. So the purpose of the book, um, so I wrote there, I created this quote: the beacon of lighthouse guides sailors safety to shore. My hope is that this book can serve as your guiding light, helping you find your way home to your true self. And the true self only happens when you can unbury all of those layers of behaviors, one at a time. There's many times where I thought, oh, gee, I've gotten past that. And lo and behold, it kicks me in the butt again
Yeah.
because there's another facet that comes to light. So my hope is that people can take these tools and different modalities that I talk about. Automatic writing has been real huge for me. And I do a chapter on that. And so that, I believe, is why I went through all of that stuff. Not everybody that has been in a relationship with a narcissist has sexual abuse. Not everybody has sexual abuse that was with a narcissist. Not everybody that was gaslit necessarily has a food addiction. They're all separate things that we go through. And sometimes reading a chapter can be triggering. And I'm not that I'm happy about people being triggered, but if they can take that knowledge of being triggered and say, hey, this is something I need to look at, or where did this impact me, and do some work on that trigger, that's music to my ears and gives me hope that my book will be of help to people.
I love that because a little personal thing on me, when I was going to AA meetings and stuff to support my wife, they talked about boundaries and triggers, right? And I literally thought it was just for them. It took me a long time to realize I can have triggers and boundaries, right? Just as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just finished this 3-week coaching session, as I mentioned earlier. And my dad was hard on me, right? And we had a fallout years and years ago. I didn't see or speak with him for 5.5 years. The last time I saw him is when he was dying in Yuma. And I had a chance to talk with him. Of course, him being my dad, once they took the oxygen off, he still didn't let up. He was still punching me, right?
I'm not laughing at you. I totally
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, and I understand that. And a lot of things that I went through in the depths of my wife's addiction, right? And I kept telling myself, and I was telling others, that I have forgiven them. I've forgiven my dad, I've forgiven her. And then I take this coaching session and they really start getting deep in some things. And Madison, I realized I had not forgiven completely. I was telling myself I was, right? I was still holding on to things. And I really started thinking about it afterwards. And I remember times that I've talked with my mom and I'd say, "Oh yeah, well, this is what he did to me." So I'm still bringing things up, right? Now, if I had forgiven, I would let these things die. I'd let them go, right? That's water under the bridge. It happened 30 years ago. Why am I
Yeah.
still bringing it up? During that coaching session, I remember I was rubbing my left leg and I was rocking back and forth, and I had tears, just alligator tears, just pouring down my cheeks because they really opened up a wound, right? The pus, the infection was starting to ooze out of me. That's why I was reacting the way that I was reacting. And it really, really opened my eyes. And like with your book, someone reads one of the chapters of trauma or sexual abuse or the gaslighting, whatever it may be, it's going to resonate with them. And what you put in that book will hopefully be there to get them to think a little bit more, because it worked for me just going through a 2-hour coaching session, because now I get to catch myself, right? I've
Yeah.
caught myself so far, and I know it's going to subside and get better and better, where I get ready to go out and start saying something again, and then I recognize it. My consciousness finally recognizes, and I go, wait a minute, I don't need to say this anymore because I'm healed from it, right? I don't need to bring it up. And it sounds like this is what your hope is for your book, right? Is to help
Right.
people in that sense.
Yeah. Well, it's very, very common, especially when you're writing about a memoir that's about yourself or whatever. The first draft, in my case, probably the first 10 drafts, lots of editing. You write it for yourself. I mean, when I first started writing about, like I think I mentioned that gaslighting was going to be the topic I thought. And when I first started writing the book, there was so much justifying, and just so the particular subject of gaslighting, I had written like 14 pages on that. I was just dumping on, and I didn't realize I didn't do that to make the other person look like, the wicked witch or anything, but I thought I was honestly sharing what needed to be shared. And when all was said and done, and that chapter did get put in the book, all of that I had written, those 14 pages, I might have used a sentence and a half out of all of it.
Holy cow.
That book, the writing the book was so cathartic for me. It was when I was writing the book that I understood why my son believed I was a narcissist and why I did what I did and justified it all. I didn't understand that when I started writing this, that when I started this gig, I didn't understand any of that.
Yeah.
So I learned so much about myself and my behaviors and my attitudes and my perspectives during the writing of this book. So um, it's written to encourage people to really take a look at themselves and what's gone on in their lives. I had several people I invited to read the book before it got published. And there was one woman that she's a good friend, actually, started reading it, and she got through the first 3 chapters, and she called me and she says, I can't read this book. I just got too triggered. I'm so sorry. I
Wow.
just can't read it. Well, unbeknownst to me, she took those triggers and did some work with doing a method that she and I both know how to do. She did some extensive work, went back and reread the book and then told me that she really was thankful for the book because had I not written it, she wouldn't have seen those triggers and she wouldn't have done the work to get to where she's at on the other side. And that's my hope for other people. I've had a lot of people say, geez, there was one person that doesn't have any of the issues that I have or have gone through anything like I have per se, but just reading what I had written about uh, something about my son, she said that she realized how controlling she was and how opinionated she was in one particular area with she and one of her son's relationships. And they were going to a big family function, and she was able to pull this son aside and say, hey, I am sorry. I don't need to control this.
Wow.
And that was just an awareness that she got from reading my book.
That's got to
So
make you feel pretty good, Madison, right? I
it
mean,
does. It
that
does.
I think you said at the beginning of the show, or it was right before we started recording. This is the path that God's put you on, right? You went through everything you went through for a reason.
Yeah,
Now, when you get feedback like that, that's got to give you feel goods.
it does. It does. And it's just I've said all along, even in with the writing retreats and things that I've done to write the book and all of the editing and all of that stuff, that even if it only helps one person initially, the ripple effect that will have. I mean, this book has a potential of changing generations after generation. Because
Absolutely.
when we learn stuff and we come to an aha or whatever, it changes energetically 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. And that's huge. That's
Yes, it
huge.
is. That's very
So,
huge.
if I can be part of that instrument to facilitate that, then I'm grateful. And that's
Yeah.
another reason why I said earlier, I am so grateful for that accusation that my son gave me. Because had he not, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Yeah. Well, and I think we continue, and again, this is just how I see it. We continue to go through the same issues in life until we finally learn that lesson, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And it's so
Yeah.
we can move on to the next one, because I remember a lot of stuff that's happened to me here in my whole life, and especially the last couple of years, wanting to know why I continue to go through it. And it's because I hadn't figured it out. And then once I figured it out, it seemed like that issue disappeared like that. It was almost like in an instant, like someone flipping on and off a switch.
Yeah.
Now, you go around the corner and there's another dark room, right? Again,
Yeah.
that's till we figure it out. And it's great that we have individuals like yourself and so many others that take their life lessons and put it in a book for others to read. I mean, you said, I think you said 9 chapters in your book. Was that correct? You have 9 chapters.
19.
Nine,
19.
19. Even if just one chapter resonated out of the 19 or out of
Yeah.
the other 18,
Yeah.
you just changed someone's life. And I love the ripple effect, because that's how a tsunami starts, right? It starts out at a very tiny wave, thousands of miles, hundreds of miles outside in the ocean. By the time it reaches shore, the damn
Yeah.
thing's pretty huge.
Yeah. It's my hope that people will share the book because my message has the potential to have so much impact on people, you know. And that's my hope, is that's what will happen. I didn't write the book to you don't get rich unless you're J.K. Rowling's or, Edgar, whatever, from writing a book. That's not where the payoff comes. I'm hoping to be able to get some speaking engagements out of this, and because the whole purpose of doing that even is to spread the word even further, have a bigger reach. And
Yeah,
that's my intention. So
that's my intention as well. And I don't have a book. I have a ton of people constantly telling me you need to get a book, you need to get a book, because that definitely helps you get more speaking engagements. And that could be so. They're probably right. However, I also believe that you can still get speaking engagements without a book. And maybe that inspires you more to write a book, or helps bring in enough funds so you can write a book. Because writing a
Yeah.
book isn't isn't free.
No.
You've got a lot of things behind the scenes to make
Oh,
everything
absolutely.
all come together, and it
Absolutely.
takes the funds or sponsors or investors. And speaking, my gosh, that's where I want to be. I mean, I love doing this show. I chomp at the bit. I cannot wait for Fridays to come, so I can do these shows and be with amazing individuals like yourself, and learn some life lessons as I'm doing it. However, being in front of an audience on stage or just on a floor, I don't know, it does something to me. It's I guess I could say it would be like me years ago doing a line of cocaine. It's just like, oh, it just wakes me up, and I'm just so excited, and I just want to share the emotions and the beliefs and the power behind it,
Yeah,
because that's what gets my serotonin going, man. I don't even realize it's happening, right? Because I've
I
seen
understand that.
little clips, and when I
Yeah,
see those little clips, I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that. Right?
yeah.
You don't realize it.
Well, a friend of mine tells me that, when I start talking about stuff, that I get in like this zone, and half the time I don't remember what I say. You know, oh, I said that. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
you know, because that's just part of who I am. I've always been a giver and always wanted to share. Sometimes it's gotten me in trouble, but it is what it is. And I so enjoy teaching. When I worked in Shiro's out of the prison, I really enjoyed teaching the class out there. Um, Going into a little bit different direction with Shiro's, I think, here in the future. So I'm excited about that. Be working with folks that have come out of trafficking and or domestic violence. I'm not sure which vein I'm going to work with, but that's keeps me motivated. Keeps me. It makes me feel alive. To
yeah.
share all of those things.
With you saying that, Madison, have you heard of Hope to Soap, or
Mm-mm,
Soap to Hope?
I
So
have not.
there's a beautiful young lady who I got to meet through the recovery community a couple years ago. Her name's January, and she came from trafficking. And she is one brave woman. I tell you what, she will be the one that's out on the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning, out there talking to women, right? And these women are being watched continuously,
Oh,
continuously.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So they have their gala that's coming up on December 1st. I just purchased my ticket last week, and I'm hoping to get January to come on and talk a little bit about it before this gala comes up. Yeah, and I'm really excited to go to it, because a lot of the proceeds goes back to helping save these girls. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it still falls underneath the addiction umbrella, right? Because
Oh,
they
absolutely.
throw
It
the
does.
addiction in there to keep them where they need them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a heinous thing. You know, it, it's hard for me to say which is more devastating, trafficking or domestic violence. I mean, I've seen things on both ends of that spectrum that just curl your toes. Some of the
Yeah,
things that go on. Some of the women that I worked with at the prison, to hear their stories, it's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's tough out there. But I also believe that there is a ray of hope, because there are people such as yourself, myself, and a lot of other folks that are doing something about it. It's not just lip service anymore.
Yeah,
And I feel hopeful about that, no pun intended, because we can do good works.
we can.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I actually pulled up, I don't know if this see it on the screen real quick, but kind of that oops, that glare, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's soap to hope. And if you're interested, I could shoot you over, the screenshot that I have of it. Might be
Yeah.
something that you might want, if you can attend, and you'll probably meet some amazing individuals that is
Yeah.
right in that area of what you're looking for. And again,
Yeah.
January is definitely well known in the community for what she's doing, and she's helped so many people. And
That's awesome.
it takes guts, right? It takes guts to jump in and
Well, it does, and
something like
it's,
that.
people have read my book and they'll say, wow, because I bare my soul. I'm laying out there naked on the pages pretty much. Um, because that's what I needed to do. It's not like that I relish in talking about gore and pain and all of those things, but I'm very real on those pages.
Yeah.
And, people will say, I don't know how you did that. How, I had no idea. I've heard that so many times.
You know what though? Because you're doing that, you're giving others permission to open up as
Yeah.
well. And the reason why I can say that is because the same things happened on my end, right? When I was keeping things quiet and I first started opening up, and this was back in 2019, late part of 2019, people who I've known for years, I'd go to a networking group and they would come up to me and go, "Can I talk to you in private?" And we'd go off into a corner or somewhere, and they would start opening up. And they would say, "I don't know if you knew it, but I used to be an alcoholic, or I used to be a heroin addict, or this is and I'm like, "Oh my heck, are you kidding me? I've known you for
Yeah.
8 years. I had no idea." So by opening up and being vulnerable like you're doing, Madison, you're giving other people permission to go, you know what, it is okay to talk about it. And
Yeah.
that's what I love about doing this show. Hopefully, which so far I believe we are definitely doing that. I'm giving a platform here for someone to feel safe and non there's no non-judgmental here of people feeling judged because of their opening up and telling a part of their story that's dark, because it's not
Yeah.
who they are today. You said that earlier in the show, right? It's not who we are today. That was just a
No.
part of our life, something maybe we're not proud of, or maybe we can say we are proud because it made me who I am today. It's however
Yeah.
that they want to look at it. I've had a half a dozen in the 220 something shows I've done. I've had a half a dozen people come on this show and share their story for the very first time. And it's
Wow.
because of our guests, our past guests that have come on the show and shared their story.
Yeah. 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 So,
Oh,
it's there's just so much, but I think for the listeners, I also want to emphasize the point that when we're working through stuff and it gets tough, and you may think you're worked through an issue, like you said, you thought you had forgiven your dad. I had kind of a similar situation. My birth mom and my dad got divorced when I was 3, and my dad got custody of me. Basically, he bullied her into that, giving me up. And I did not have any contact with her from the time I was 4 years old until I turned 18. Had
oh
no
my
contact
gosh.
with her at all. She would try and come to visit me, and she was always told now's not a good time, blah, 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 blah. There was always an excuse. Well, when I connected with her at 18, 19, well, I met her as an adult at 18. And then I thought, I don't trust this woman. And then a year and a half or so went by, and I thought, maybe I really ought to reach out to her and just see. And so we started talking. I was living in California, she was here, and we started writing. And went and she came to visit, and she says, I always loved you. I didn't abandon you. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker only because I wanted that relationship so drastically. I was so hungry for it. And fast forward, what, probably 15, 16 years later, I was in a treatment center, and I decided to write her a letter. And I told her, I'm not okay with that. You abandoned me. How can you say you love me all the time, knowing that you left me? That didn't make sense to me. So I finally wrote her a letter. She got very, very angry, and I never saw her again. And years after that, actually, when I started writing this book, I realized that I needed to forgive her, even more than another layer of forgiveness, if you will. So I did some more work, some more reading, a lot of praying, and I ended up doing a little bit of a ceremony, if you will. I found out where she was buried. Sorry, I forgot that part. She died, and I didn't see her the last 20 years of her life. And I found out where she'd been buried. I went up to the grave, and I buried something there, did a little ceremony and stuff. And it was then, and only then, was I truly able to say, I forgive you, and let it go. But the forgiveness came in layers, just layers, a piece at a time.
Wow. This layer thing, I've heard this so many times on shows, and it reminds me of Shrek, right? When he's talking to Donkey about ogres are like onions,
Yeah,
and it is so true, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of layers on an onion, and really
there,
that's how our life is, right?
yeah.
We just keep peeling it back and keep peeling it back and keep peeling it back, and they make us cry sometimes.
Well, and if you stop and think about it, anybody, like in my particular case, at one time I weighed 268 pounds, and I didn't put that 268 pounds on overnight. So
Mhm.
the layers to get that weight off also had to be layer at a time. And I'm still learning. It just, I've started working the 12 steps. I do belong to a program called Bright Line Eating, and it was founded by a woman who was a cocaine addict and alcoholic, and she's very, very vulnerable and so transparent. I just love her. But learning how the 12-step program fits into all of that, and I'm still learning a ton. I do participate in Bright Line Eating 12-step online Zoom calls. I do 3 of those a week. I work with the sponsor, and I'm still here working the steps.
Yeah,
But it's what I need to do to progress and learn about myself even more, layer by layer.
yeah, I love it. That is very well put, very well put, and we all need to look at it that way. And sometimes it takes something tragic in our life to open our eyes, right?
Yeah, it does.
And I've said many times on the show, we have to stop looking at life through a straw. Put a split at the end of that thing and start opening up, because
Yeah.
there's so many blessings out there every single day. And when you're looking at life through a straw, we're missing them. We are missing them
Oh,
completely. They're
absolutely.
going by us like crazy, and we just don't see it. And then we're the first one to go, "Nah, nothing cool ever happens to me," right?
That's so true. So
So,
true.
so Madison, do you have a copy of your book right there that you can hold up to show? Okay, Untangle the Web of Narcissism. I love it. How can people find this book?
It's on Amazon. It's available right now as an ebook, as a soft cover, hardcover, and God willing, it'll be available on Audible about the middle of December.
Wow,
So
how cool is that?
yeah, the woman that is reading the book is just amazing. I am so tickled with the voice talent that my publisher found for me. She's remarkable. And the thing about my book is that it's a tough book to read, get through in some respects, but it's a short read. It's only 210 pages long, and that's including the bibliography. Listening to the chapters on Audible, they're maybe 5-6 minutes, maybe. So you can get through the book quite quickly. But what I really suggest is read it and then go back and see what parts you resonate with, and even read it again. This is a book that's full of resources and tools that can be picked up over and over and over again. So on my website, I do have some free resources. There's a couple of PDFs. I am certified, excuse me, EFT tapping, which EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. I am a certified practitioner, and so there are some pieces on there for tapping. And I'm slowly building my YouTube channel. There's 2 videos on it right now, but I'm getting ready to do some more. It's been probably the biggest Achilles heel for me throughout this whole process is the social media and the whole. I'm still trying to figure out how to do posts and all of those things. I had to buy a new laptop in the middle of all of this because mine died.
Oh, geez.
So there's been a lot of technological stuff that's been hiccups. That's why it took me as long to write the book as it did, because I had technical stuff. But it's there, and I'm excited about it. And you know, if anybody wants me to come and speak in their organization, you can contact me through my website. The URL is madisonfrederick.com, easy peasy.
Okay.
So yeah.
Now, is the easy peasy at the end of it, or you're just saying easy peasy?
Maybe I should have added that. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
But
I have that too. So I'll make sure that it gets on the show notes. I'll make sure that it's down there at the bottom.
yeah.
Before we sign off, what would you like our listeners to gain from today's show, and or what would be your main message?
What they can gain is to understand that if I went through all of this stuff and came through out to the other side, they can do it too. And in that process, my suggestion, I can't stress enough, is to please, 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 please be kind to yourself when you're going through this stuff, because it didn't happen to you overnight. Sometimes trauma is decades in the making. Sometimes it's just one event. But like for me personally, the sexual abuse that happened to me was like a heavy anchor on my heel for almost 50 years before I was able to let that go and come to peace with that and forgive my brother.
Wow.
So, it eats at you. I mean, my book, I really went through some mental stuff with that because it happened when I was young. And there are a lot of things that I didn't understand about my body and how that all functioned. So yeah, it ate me for a long time.
Holy cow.
So,
Well, that is really good advice. And thank you again for sharing
yeah, my
everything
pleasure.
you shared and opening up, and thank you for writing your book, because it sounds like it's already started some ripples, which is amazing. And we won't even really know, right? None of us really know how huge that ripple will get. We just know it's going to happen. So thank you so much.
Well, I believe that my higher power, God, the universe, however folks want to label it, is behind all of this. I said for years I didn't have the money. I don't have a lot of money. And I told my publisher, or my writing coach, Bridget, I have no idea how and when this is going to get published. But each step that I had to do financially, the money appeared.
Yeah.
So I believe that this book was meant to be.
Well, I'd have to agree with you, right? Because that's how it works. We start taking the steps, and then again, God or your universe, however it is you want to look at it, steps in and starts placing the chess pieces right in front of us, and
Exactly.
things just start to happen.
Yeah.
Well, Madison, again, thank you so much. Thank you to all our past guests and all our listeners, our sponsors. Again, guys, none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you. You guys are the ones that's making this a success, and I greatly, greatly appreciate all your support. We're going to end it with, as we do at the end of every show. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything.
For everything.
We're out.